Sorry about that. Imin at Gentay Dosh, na Legislature and Guahan is called to order. I'd like to recognize the Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move that we adopt the agenda dated August 21st, 2013, and then I would put the bills when we get onto the motions portion of it.
Okay. On the motion without any objections, so ordered. So I'd like to ask if Senator Tony Ada, if you can lead us in prayer.
Lord, in thy name we have assembled, and in thy name we desire to proceed in all our doings. Grant that this body may so subdue every discordant passion within us, so harmonize and enrich our hearts with thy own love and goodness, that may humbly reflect that order and beauty which reign forever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Senator. For the recitation of the Inifresi, can I ask Senator Tom Ada? Inifresi.
Inifresi. Gininimas tatkilo imastakkalong gi corazonho, zanimas figo na ninyasinyahu, ofrecen maisazo para bairro protege, zanhu defendi, I hinengi, I cultura, I lenguaje, I airi, I hano, zanitano tomoro. Ni irin shako diretso gininazu stata. Este hua fitma, gihilo I Biblia, zani banderahu, I banderan guahan.
Thank you, Senator. And if Senator Rodriguez, if you can help us with the singing of the Guam hymn in Chamorro, and Senator Brant McCready in the singing of the national anthem. Thank you, Senators. Roll call.
Senator Tom Adda. Senator Tony Adda. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Uggan. Senator Duenas. Senator Lim Tiaco. Senator McCready. Senator Morrison. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Snickles. Speaker Wampat.
Geiger.
Senator Yamashita. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Senator Munya Barnes is also here. Senator Respicio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that we excuse those senators not present for session.
On the motion, without any objection, so ordered.
And thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that we approve the legislative journal dated August 12th through August 20th, 2013, subject to correction.
On the motion, without objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
And there are messages from Imagalahin Guahan, and I also move that they be appended to today's session journal,
No objection, so ordered.
as well as reports of standing committees. I call for the same.
No objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, I move that Bill number 166-32LS through Bills 171-32LS be given its first reading,
No objection, so ordered.
as well as Bill 172-32COR be given its first reading,
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
and Resolution number 196-32LS through Resolutions 205-32LS be given its first reading,
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
and certificate numbers 51-32 through 53-32 also be given its first reading.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, my first motion is that any resolution of congratulatory or condolence in nature that's introduced for the duration of this session, that it be adopted with all senators as co-sponsors, and that the sponsors work closely with the legal counsel and the clerk in the preparation of these documents.
No objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, I move that Bill number 155-32COR, as amended by the author, an act to accept and approve the terms and conditions of the appended agreement between the Bank of Guam and Legislature in Guahan with the assistance and advice of the Guam Economic Development Authority, GIDA, relative to financing the reconstruction of the historic Guam Legislature building in Hagåtña in conjunction with the Guam Preservation Trust to include modernizing, refurbishing, and restoring the existing structure, which is an important component of the revitalization of Hagåtña. I move that this bill be placed on the second reading file.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I have 4 other bills that they're all companion bills. They are namely Bill number 121-32 LS, an act to appropriate the sum of $700,000 is cheated to the general fund pursuant to 2116 of Chapter 21, Division 2, Title 5, GCA, to the Department of Administration for the purpose of funding the acquisition of software, migration, fiber connection, security, and other upgrades necessary to support and protect the Government of Guam's computer system and network infrastructure. I move this be placed on the second reading file.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
As well as I move that Bill 122-32LS, sponsored by yourself and others. It's an act to appropriate the sum of $400,000 is cheated from the general fund pursuant to 21116 of Chapter 21, Division 2, Title 5 of GCA to the Guam Police Department for the purchase of new police vehicles. I move that that be placed in the second reading
Hearing no
file.
objection, so ordered.
Another bill introduced by yourself, Madam Speaker, and others, Bill 124-32, an act to appropriate the sum of $1.4 million is cheated to the general fund pursuant to 2116 of Chapter 21, Division 2, Title 5 GCA to the Department of Revenue and Taxation for the purpose of funding real property reevaluation.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
As well as Bill number 63-32. The version is as substituted by the author and on the floor. And it's introduced by yourself and others, and it's an act to amend subsection 22425Q of Article 4, Chapter 22, Division 2, Title 5 GCA, relative to designating additional revenue derived from the valuation of real property due to commence during calendar years 2013 and 2014 towards the replacement or renovation of Simon Sanchez High School and other Guam Department of Education facilities requiring new construction, rehabilitation, or maintenance for other education-related and other purposes. I move that be placed in the second reading file.
Thank you, Senator. On the motion, without any objections, so ordered. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have any legislative concurrences? Okay.
No.
All right, so we're in the second reading file, and I'd like to recognize the Majority Leader on Bill number 155-32.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and colleagues. You have before you Bill 155-32 as amended by the author. The bill has been printed, a committee report has been filed, and copies have been made available to members, and it's also made available online. Madam Speaker and colleagues, I'm very happy to bring the legislature to this juncture. We're now at a point where we have to decide whether or not we want to accept the very attractive terms and conditions as provided to us by the Bank of Guam and as negotiated for us by the Guam Economic Development Authority. You know, Madam Speaker, many speakers before you, many rules chairpersons before me, many senators before all of us have tried really, really hard over the years to trying to move us from having to rent this temporary building and to have a home that the people of Guam can call theirs. Unfortunately, we've been here for more than 20 years, and we've been here in something that should have been a temporary situation. Being here for the last 23 years, Madam Speaker and colleagues, has cost our taxpayers to spend $7 million in rent, has caused our taxpayers to spend all of this money, and to this very day, we do not own this building. The people of Guam do not own this building. And also, Madam Speaker, over the years, we've seen many renditions of the legislature's plans going from 21 floors, which probably kind of reflected what the economic climate or the needs were at that time, going to the latest one, as reported to us by former Senator Lulian Guerrero, who was chairperson of Rules at the time, a rendition that was about $11.3 million. And in our case, Madam Speaker, our building that we're going to be reconstructing will cost $7 million and will come from a combination of two sources. As you know, many senators, including Senator Barnes and Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz, have worked extremely hard to get the legislature building to be recognized on the list of historic buildings. And as a result, we qualified, after applying with the Preservation Trust, we qualified to get some of the Preservation Trust monies to be allocated to reconstruct that project to what the building was like at the time an event in history occurred, and that event being the walkout. And so we looked at what it would cost to bring that building to its original state around the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, Madam Speaker, and it would have cost about $3 million just for that footprint. And so what we decided to do several terms ago, and we did this by adopting a resolution, we decided to explore the possibility of maybe doing phase one, which is to appropriate or to spend that $3 million, and then do a phase two, which would replicate the building that we're in now. Because very realistically, if we were to bring that building back to that level, we wouldn't have enough space to be able to replicate our central operations. And in order to make that move possible, we certainly have to either move out of this building, or we might have to bring the remaining 10 offices into this building so that we can generate some kind of significant savings to be able to fund this loan. And so looking at this project holistically, recognizing that we only have one shot to get this right, we explored all these possible options. And I want to say I'm very happy with the work that our exec director has done, Mr. Vince Ariola, and also our chief financial officer, Ms. Agnes Cruz, in taking a look at our finances, what we pay here every month in terms of rent, what we pay here every month in terms of utilities, and that amount is about $40,000. Now, if we were to move and approve this loan, Madam Speaker, the terms of the loan would be about $25,000 a month, which certainly can come from the savings we would generate by vacating this building or bringing 10 legislative offices into one building and consolidating it. And so originally the Bank of Guam and GITA negotiated a term which would be an arm. But at the public hearing, you recall, colleagues, that former Senator Leon Guerrero, who is now the president of Bank of Guam, said that she'd like to see this building done so much so that she's willing to have it where it won't be an arm, but it'll be at a fixed rate, and that fixed rate will be negotiated every 5 years. And this is why the bill has been amended to reflect the Bank of Guam's agreement in a letter that they sent to the administrator of GITA on August 13, 2013, where they say the terms is 18 months of interest-only payments during reconstruction and rehabilitation period. Once reconstruction and rehabilitation period is completed, the loan will be amortized over 222 months and will mature in 60 months. And then the maturity is a 5-year maturity with 8.5-year amortization with 3 options to renew for an additional years. And the interest rate, more specifically, the interest rate will be fixed until maturity at 1 1/4% over the Wall Street Journal prime rate with the minimum rate of 4 1/2%. And so, you know, this really is a really a good deal for the people of Guam. And it's a good deal because you heard Mr. Lester Carlson at the public hearing say that the legislature was able to get this deal because of its stellar finances, financial management, and our ability to manage the resources given to us. They looked through all of these things, Madam Speaker, and you know, what's more exciting about this project is that that building will be built where it be LEED certified to platinum level. So this would be the first building in the government of Guam, including any military building on the island, that would be certified at that level, which would mean additional savings for us in terms of our power. And so I want to go on the record to thank also former Speaker Joaquin Ariola, former Speaker Joe T. San Agustin, and former Speaker Tommy Tanaka, who really stepped forward and said that this is something that was necessary, that the legislature moved to construct a permanent home for us, and that they certainly supported it. I also want to go on record that that the delay is not really for lack of trying or lack of wanting. It's just the circumstances over the years. We know that the administration used the cash that was given to the Historic Preservation Trust, and we know that that trust was owed this kind of money. And so when the administration wanted with Skinner Plaza, Madam Speaker, for the use of the construction of the museum, we put a reversionary clause in there that in order for the land to be transferred for the use of the museum, that the governor has to use the money from the hot bonds, which was also authorized by this body, to reimburse the trust in order for that to happen. And so everything just kind of fell into place, and we're at a juncture now where should we approve this bill and should the governor sign this bill, that we can break ground in September and we can have that legislature reconstructed before the term is out. And so, and also would have it done simultaneously with the construction of the Guam Museum. And that's why, Madam Speaker, I'm happy to report that the administration, particularly Governor Calvo, is in full support of us reconstructing the Guam Legislature building, because it's in line with the whole revitalization of Hagåtña program. And so I submit to this body that what we're doing here is necessary in terms that it's a good opportunity to go from renting to finally owning, as opposed to spending $7 million in the building we're in now, and to this very day, the people of Guam do not own this building. And so I stand ready to answer any questions any of our colleagues may have. I stand ready to engage in the kind of dialogue that's going to focus on the merits of this bill and the long-term benefit of the revitalization of Hagåtña. And so I thank you for the opportunity to present this bill. More so, I thank you for your calling session so that we can address this bill, given that it's very it's time sensitive. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I move that it be placed in the third reading file.
On the motion, Senator Alim Tiaco, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I don't believe that any senator, either current or in the past, doesn't want to restore the old legislative hall. I believe everybody wants to do that. And I think I question, so the idea of restoring it to its original footprint is not the issue. The issue, Madam Speaker, that I have, and as it's pointed out in the legislative intent, as described in the legislative intent, shall create, construct, lease, or purchase a new building or buildings, or refurbish, repair, or renovate the old legislative hall and the Manuel F. L. Guerrero building for its session hall. And if we go to Section 3, Madam Speaker, and we look at the language in there that says adequate office space for Legislature Guam, really, is it adequate office space for all the senators? And we already know the answer is no to it. Yet we're trying to pursue using $4 million to expand the existing or the old legislative hall to 8,200 square feet and only house a certain amount of senators. And so when we talk about the bill's intent, and the bill's actual intent of saving funds is somewhat questionable, in the sense that we use the term $40,000, which we include the lease of this building as well as the power bill, the utility bills for this building, as a $40,000 sum. Yet we only include the debt service in the analysis of it. So we're not even including the utility bills in the analysis of the newly renovated building. So really, the savings is not in the debt service, because the debt service actually costs more than the current lease. Now, owning rather than leasing definitely is better. But whether or not we're going to really be able to truly save money is questionable, because it's predicated on whether there's going to be a savings in the utility bill. Now, that may be realized through the whole effort to produce a LEED building. But I want to go back to the entire question of whether or not it's the most prudent use of the $4 million. As described in the legislative intent, I think this body needs to consider whether that $4 million is better spent renovating the Manuel F. L. Guerrero building, so that we can take all of the senators out of the private sector leasing their office space and bring them into that building. So just think about it for a minute. Rather than expand the old legislative hall, let's take that $4 million and renovate a building that we already own, the Manuel F. L. Guerrero building, which will house or be able to house in most capacities all of the senators, especially the 10 that are currently leasing. Now, if we take the money that will be saved from leasing this building, and we couple it with the money that will be saved by not leasing outside office space, now we're really talking about a lot of money. We're talking close to $500,000. So on a debt service of $4 million, if we were to renovate the Manuel F. L. Guerrero building and bring all the senators in there, we would be able to pay off that $4 million debt in record time and free up the money for other uses, maybe further renovating that building or the old legislative hall. Yet it's kind of like the budget bill from yesterday. We're trying to put a Band-Aid on a problem, and we're ignoring the wound in its entirety. We really should be looking at it holistically. How are we going to get all of the senators out of the leasing scheme? Not just this building and the 5 or so senators that occupy this building. How are we going to get all 15 senators into a building that we own? And the answer is by utilizing that $4 million, not by expanding the old Legislative Hall, but by renovating the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building, which we own. DOE is already scheduled to move out of there, freeing up that space for renovation. And the fact that we could pay down that debt quickly by basically coming up with a savings, not of the proposed difference in whatever the utility bill is, and the lease is here to service the debt, but also an additional close to $250,000, which brings the entire savings close to $500,000. So if we're really truly going to abide by the spirit of the Capital District Fund, which is also being used to finance this debt, and also by the actual legislative intent of this bill itself, that's where we should be spending the $4 million. Not on expanding the old Legislative Hall only to house 5 or 6 senators. Let the old Legislative Hall remain in its historic footprint. Renovate it to its true potential. Use some of that $4 million to bring it up to whatever standards need to be, whether it's installing a new AC unit or wiring it for the networks, the computer systems that need to go in there. Sure, let's spend the money and do that. Let's get it to its former glory. Let's not destroy it either by adding something new to it. That's what we're trying to do, is restore it, preserve it in its original footprint. I mean, that's why we were able to get it to a historical site. Let's restore it to its original footprint. Let's be prudent and fiscally responsible and free up the other $250,000 that's currently being used to lease outside office space, and let's funnel those resources into renovating a building that we already own. It's a short walk across, and it's actually quite a pretty walk across, because with the Plaza de España being renovated, that entire park area and the Guam Museum, that's definitely a walk I would love to enjoy. I'm not sure I'll be able to have that opportunity, but it's definitely something that is much more financially responsible than just putting a Band-Aid on the problem and setting up an expansion wing of the old Legislative Hall in order to house a certain amount of senators and not truly fix the entire problem. And the entire problem is that all of our senators right now, or I should say 10 of them, are currently displaced. And by renovating the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building, it's a better use of our money. Not only that, we will pay down that debt so much faster by freeing up the lease costs. So, Madam Speaker, I have an amendment that I'd like to make. And the amendment would be in Section 2, and that's in regards to the pledge and the assignment of the Capital District Fund, and basically utilizing the $4 million to renovate the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building. And I'd like to, if we can take a small recess, I'd like to make copies and distribute it to all the senators so they have the amendment.
Madam Speaker, in the interest of time, because I think what he's trying to do is delay everything in this legislature, I'd like to speak on the amendment while you make copies.
Oh, okay, so, yes, so can Sergeant Arms, can you please get, so on the motion then, well, we're making copies. Yes, he did. He read the you read it. Yeah.
Yeah, he read it. Yeah.
He read it. So. Oh yes. Do you have it with you? Oh. Okay. So, but I think.
Well, Madam Speaker, I heard enough to be able to generate some questions to the amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Respicio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, will the author yield to a question? And the first question I have is relatively simple. How much would it cost to renovate the DOA building?
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Absolutely, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe that $4 million is sufficient to get the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building to some sort of use, to some form that we could utilize the space. And once again, we're freeing up $500,000 a year. So additional renovations
Madam Speaker,
can occur.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. He's not answering my question, and he's not prepared to, so I don't think I need him to yield to any more questions that he's not going to directly answer. But I'd like to speak on the amendment.
Okay,
Senator,
thank you,
so
Madam
you'll
Speaker.
continue then to speak on the
Yeah,
amendment.
thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I certainly appreciate the kind of outside of the box thinking and the different ideas that can be put before us. and I would never give up hope in trying to let the mover of the amendment understand over and over how these critical components have to come together in order for it to work. We've had a series of public hearings. We've adopted a series of resolutions that brought us to this juncture. And also, Madam Speaker, we had a public hearing on this bill itself where we were given an overview by the architect as well as the executive director. And following that public hearing, I did a Dear Colleague letter that kind of explained what the old legislature building looked like. If you just look at the original footprint, and I have a map here which I showed by way of a Dear Colleague letter, it showed that there's a north and south wing. And there was the additional building space that was constructed with wood, that was used by way of a temporary, like a modular home type structure. I mean, those senatorial and administrative offices were in temporary type buildings back then, so it was not a concrete structure. And so, again, I want the mover of the amendment to understand that in order to realize these $40,000 a month of cost avoidances, we're going to have to vacate the building that we're in now, or we're going to have to find a way to bring those 10 offices in. The $3 million restoration project is not going to be enough to house the administrative component of the legislature. And so that administrative component back then was being operated out of the north wing. And so those buildings are no longer there because they were temporary structures that had to be demolished because they deteriorated. And so this is why when I first assumed the position of chairman on rules, I started looking into what can we do with that $3 million and what do we have in our own resources to leverage so that this thing can work. And so what the senators agreed to at the time by way of a resolution was to explore phase 2. And so phase 2 would have replicated everything that we have here so we can vacate this kind of structure that we have now. And so to now offer an amendment and to just simply say $4 million is more than necessary without even presenting to us any A&Es or any document showing that this is what it would cost to renovate the Manuel F. Guerrero building. And the other thing, Madam Speaker, is this loan that the Bank of Guam is giving to us is because the president of the Bank of Guam, because of our history here in the legislature, wants to see that legislature building reconstructed to its old glory and how it should be. That's why the Bank of Guam responded to the request for proposal from GITA. So we don't have the luxury of now seeing that $4 million is available, and instead of applying it to the plans that we adopted, apply it to some other plan, which we're not ready to go with that plan. So for lack of information that the mover of the amendment is providing to us, I simply rise in opposition to it. And I ask that all of us get on board and recognize how important this project is going to be and how it's going to revitalize the whole Hagåtña area. And so I rise in opposition to the amendment.
On the amendment, Senator Yamashita, you recognize.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to speak on this amendment. Madam Speaker, while I do believe, I think I understand why the amendment is being proffered, I suggest that this amendment is before its time. I do believe that GDOE is talking about moving out, but nothing is definite. I do believe that there are plans being discussed with GITA about the whole renovation of the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building, but nothing is definite. There are no plans, there are no cost estimates, there are no steps. And as we know that this particular project of the Guam Legislature has been on the table for 20 years or so, and because work has been done to get it to a place where we have a very attractive, a very good deal on the table being offered by our local bank, it would seem to me that we would want to move forward in doing this. And to talk on the whole bill, I will talk another time why I believe that. But right now, to say that the $4 million will take care of the renovation of the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building, I think is a bit premature. Madam Speaker, you are well aware that I spent quite a few, maybe it was a decade of my professional life in that building. And I certainly know about the unhealthy state of that building. And so I would be the first one to say, can we invest in that building to ensure that our employees are in a healthy environment? But again, in talking to DOE board members, in talking to superintendents at the DOE system, in talking to the GITA administrator, there is conversation, but nothing has made it to a plan of saying how much it's going to take, how much shall be made, the whole puzzle, to put it together, again, and I understand, I believe I understand what the mover of this amendment is trying to do, to make it cohesive, to make it whole, to be smart about it. I don't think we're at that point yet. But I do think we are at the point to put back our Guam legislature at a place of glory and honor of what this branch actually deserves. And again, I will speak on the main bill when it is time to do so. So, Madam Speaker, I speak against this amendment. Thank you.
On the amendment, Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to echo the sentiments of the retiring speaker. You know, absent any plans, I mean, it's very difficult for us to have any confidence in saying that this amount of money is going to be adequate to provision the building in a way that's going to be suitable for it to be utilized. And there's just an additional concern that I have as well in going this route, because if we are going to say that this $4 million is going to go to fix that building to move the legislature there, then where are we going to put DOA? And where are we going to put DOE? Right now, DOA has vacated and they're renting. DOE, if they vacate, may have to rent. Those are additional rental expenses that are going to be incurred by this government in order to move the legislature over there. So we need to be thinking about the big picture. The same way we thought about the big picture when we passed the most recent budget, Madam Speaker. We looked at different facets, different avenues, and we made sure that everything matched up: revenue projections, savings, priorities. All those elements went into the research and analysis and determination of that budget bill. The same way that we need to make sure we have the same kind of thoroughness when we're evaluating this proposal. Because we can say that, yes, moving the legislature over there will save money, but that doesn't account for what we're going to do with the displaced agencies and how they're going to be able to meet their needs and expenses. How much is it going to cost to move DOE someplace else, because they're going to have renovation and upgrade improvements if it's going to be into another government building? How much is it going to cost to move DOA someplace else, because they're going to have expenses to incur in order to get the building up to speed for them to be able to operate the way they need to. So just as it's premature for someone to say they want to veto a budget without even having looked at it and seeing how well thought out it was, it's also premature to say that this is going to save us money without looking at all the other costs down the road. So, Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition of this amendment, and I see where the proffer of the amendment is going with this, but it requires so much more than just saying take it from here and move it there because it's going to be better on the surface. There's just so much more to it, and it needs to be more thoroughly vetted in order for it to be considered a viable alternative. But I do believe that if we were to go through all those motions, in the end, we'll see that the savings is not really there. We'll see that the actual realities are going to be an added cost to not only provision that building for the legislature, but to provision the other agencies that are going to be displaced as a result in order for them to find a permanent home as well. So in agreement with the retiring speaker, I believe that this aspect is premature. I believe that there is going to be a more viable solution for the Guerrero building that I think that we can address, that'll be to the benefit of the Department of Education and the Department of Administration, because I personally believe that that building or whatever facility that we are able to put there is for them. You know, I believe that taking care of DOE with the merit bonuses in the budget is just as important in setting up their office space as well in order to suit their needs. And just as I believe in the merit bonuses of the budget, we shouldn't just ignore fairness in DOE. I think we also need to be fair to DOE in looking at their building and not just saying we're going to move the legislature there and not think about all the provisions they're going to need if we're going to move them. I think that it's important for us to really think about education and understand that we aren't just going to take surface politics and use it to get the outcomes that we want or to send the message that we want. We need to be thinking things through, and we need to be thinking about education especially, and how we're going to make sure that the actions we're taking today, whether it's for the legislative building or to move us one place or another, isn't going to be displacing them and adding even more costs. Because if we do, that's not in the budget. How much is that going to cost? So I think that this amendment raises more questions than it does provide solutions. And I think that it's important for us to appreciate not only all the hard work that's gone into provisioning for the planned legislature building as the bill represents, but also appreciate the awesome terms and conditions that are being provided to us by our local bank, the Bank of Guam. So thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would like to also make additional comments on the bill as a whole. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Welcome, Senator. On the motion, on the amendment, Senator Munya Barnes, you recognize.
Sana Maasi, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak just briefly about the amendment that's before us. And as I share a lot of the sentiments from the two retiring speakers, I want to share for the listening audience that when this project was being brought to bringing a full revitalization to the Congress building that was given to us in 1948, it took a lot of hard work, and it took a lot of coming together as government agencies to collaborate and integrate the resources that we had, but more importantly is to not take away of what is being utilized for housing from our other brother and sister agencies that are there today. When an application was, when I was the oversight of Guam Preservation Trust, we had talked about the idea of working close to what our previous colleagues who had their heart and souls to the legislature. How could we bring that building back? How could we bring something that was history? How can we bring it back to life? And when we talked about working the process through the grant process, you cannot just go through a whole grant application process or work something, and then when you finally get the resources or get the grant application, that you can go ahead and make changes and say, no. Now that we've come this far, we're going to change everything in midstream. And maybe that's what needs to be told, is how we came to where we're at today. When I was looking over the reports, and the good speaker from Tamuning shared a word in Chamorro when he was at the public hearing, and he says, "Alos ultimo." Finally is what he said to this August body about finally bringing back the home that was opened to this August body, that we were finally going to revive, rebuild, and bring it back to its original glory. When he said those words at that public hearing, and that was reiterated to me, I said he's right. But it took a lot of heartache, a lot of working closely with where we can find the resources, and making sure that what we as an August body own today and what is being utilized today, that we don't take from Peter to pay Paul or break from Peter to give to Bill. We take and we work with what we have and what we have to work around, because we cannot take away from where our own people continue to be at today. And I'm telling you, Madam Speaker, and to those who are listening today, it is not easy to find resources. It is not easy. But with good collaboration, working closely with you, working closely with the Committee on Rules, for the last 2 or 3 terms, we said we're going to do this, we're going to bring this building back, we're going to work with what grants we can work with today, we're going to revitalize this, but we're going to bring the stakeholders to the table. And this is where we're at today. And to change that in midstream and saying because we have that and that, this new resource, the $4 million can be reutilized, can be taken and be used for something else. It doesn't work that way. That's not the way the government works. When you apply for something, you have to use that given resource for what you asked for. So I tell you, Madam Speaker, as much as I look at making sure that our government is very frugal, very transparent, and follows through, I think what we need to do here is follow the plan that all those or all of us stakeholders that played a part of doing this and have gotten this far, is that we don't change the course of action today. I want you to know, Madam Speaker, that when you and I were working on this project and the good majority leader was taking oversight of this and our efforts to making sure that all our I's were dotted and our T's were crossed, that we would make sure that the funding that was going to be utilized will make sure that based on the way we live today and what we need to do to conserve energy, that all those things were put into play. And I believe that if we change the course of action today, that we would have just fouled everything up. So at this time, Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the amendment that's proffered this afternoon, and I look forward to working with what the good majority leader has done to move this program over to make sure that the full revitalization and the glory of our Congress building comes to full fruition. Sana Masi.
You're welcome, Senator. Is anyone else who would like to speak on the amendment? There being none, I'd like to call Senator Limtiaco to close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I definitely appreciate the input from our colleagues because it sheds some light on the true motivation of this bill. And when we talk about whether or not enough analysis has gone back to it, well, we just kind of back up a little bit and see how short-sighted the initial bill and the initial design work that was done on the old legislative hall, that in itself was premature because we weren't looking at the big picture. We were just so dead set on this, like the retiring speaker refers to, this course that they're headed down, they were so dead set on it that they had the blinders on the entire time. Rather than look at the problem holistically and try to figure out a financial solution for the entire legislature, they're just like, this is what I want. You go into a toy store, this is what I want, right here, this one, Mommy. I don't want anything else, just this one. Well, what about this one over here? No, just this one. And that's part of the problem, is that the analysis could have been done at the same time. We could have done the analysis on both buildings, determined the best and financially responsible solution, but we didn't do that. So to say that we want to just stay the course, that's akin to saying, I want to go down with the ship. The ship is sinking, but hey, you know what? That's the ship that I rode in on, so I'm just going to go down with the ship. Rather than just say, well, okay, wait a minute, let's step back a little bit and look again at whether or not we're headed down the right path. We could always change. We could always back up. So when we take the when we make comments about whether or not the this amendment is premature, okay. So let's stop the process altogether and just let's reanalyze everything that we're doing. Do we want to go ahead and just make a mistake because we're so far along that it's too hard for us? It's too difficult to change course? It's too difficult to think out of the box? Just because we're so far, we have one more step to go. Although that step is not the most financially prudent, let's just go ahead and do it anyway. And that, Madam Speaker, is the problem with our government as a whole. We do this every time. All we have to do is go back to yesterday and take a look at the same short-sightedness as this bill has. Let's pay 100% of everything. Let's pay everybody everything. This year, okay, we figured out how to afford it in FY14, but I don't know how to do it in FY15, and definitely don't know how to do it in FY17, but let's just do it anyway. Because we're so far down the road, we have the 8 votes, let's just go ahead and do it. It's the same thing, and that's the problem. We make these mistakes all the time. Not to say that any of the work that has gone into it can't be applauded. Everybody applauds the work that's gone into it, especially the work to get the $3 million to restore the old Legislative Hall to its original footprint. That's not the question. That's a different funding source altogether. What we're talking about is the additional $4 million to expand it. Is it the best use of the money? Do we really know how much the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building is going to cost to renovate? We don't. But does that mean that we should just keep going ahead, go down the road that only to find out that we still don't understand how we're going to alleviate the legislature with a $250,000 office lease burden every year? We don't know that problem because we didn't take the time on the onset to figure out how we can make that work, even though in the legislative intent and by the spirit of the Capital District Fund, it was all in there already. I believe some of the senators were also part of that legislature when it was developed. They knew full well that that was the design. They knew full well that the old Legislative Hall could not accommodate all 15. So there's a reason why that the Manuel F.L. Guerrero building was in the original intent of the law on the Capital District Fund. It was all in there. It was by design. But once again, we pick and choose which road we want to go down to, no matter whether it's financially responsible or not. And then we just make the decisions. And how much longer will our government continue to make those decisions? That's the point. Sure, there's a lot of merit to be said about whether or not we know the exact figure on what it's going to cost to renovate the building. But we know its potential. We know its potential could free up $500 million a year. So is it worth maybe 6 months in studying it and delaying this bill so that we can find out and make a prudent decision? Or do we want to just full throttle it all the way down to a solution that's just not going to work? It's not the right solution. Or at least it's a partial solution, like I referred to, it's a Band-Aid. And how much longer will we continue to just keep putting Band-Aids on the problem? Just because we don't want to just take a small step back and just figure out how to make it work. Just like what the governor is suggesting in the budget bill, let's just take a step back and implement as we can afford it. This is the same thing. We're going down a road and we just don't want to turn back because it's too hard or it's too difficult or we put too much work into it. Well, that's not right. And it's definitely not how we should be making our decisions, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
There is an objection, so all in favor of the Limtiaco amendment, please raise your hand. The amendment failed. On the main motion, Senator Yamashita, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of Bill number 155-32. And as we have just spent maybe an hour talking about investments and the money part of it, of course we want to be prudent and of course we want to be smart about the investments. And as I said when I was talking against a profit amendment, I realize that a lot of work and study and research has gone into the plan that we have in front of us. Madam Speaker, what I want to talk about is that this investment is about more than renovating a building. This investment is about restoring a place of honor, a place where your dad, my dad tried, but he didn't prevail, but many, many leaders came together and found their voices, where our history was created because our leaders had the courage to come together and to determine that what we had in front of us, what we had surrounding us, what we had determined for us was not correct. This is a place where courage was fostered, was shared, was rendered, where walkouts were planned, where brains came together, where decisions were made. The branch of this government, the legislature, the Guam Congress, has moved our people ahead in many different ways, Madam Speaker. And then, as has it, the building, the place of honor, deteriorated. So then we've been here for the past 20 years. And the arguments have been made and will continue to be made about that investment. What I suggest, Madam Speaker, that the investment in honor is priceless. This investment is to put back a place where we will honor, where we will celebrate, where we will root, where we will sustain, where we will house continuous conversation, deliberation about what we need to do to get our island community in a place of good standing, good education, good health, good recreation, where all people can prevail. Because frankly, we all know that Guam is good, Guam can be much better. We know that there's great progress in policy, but we know that there's great room for improvement in policy for all people. So the $4 million investment is money. It is a result of good conversations, deals, investments, decisions made by our local bank and by our director and our committee on rules. But it is about honoring all whom have come together to get us where we are today. And it is about ensuring that we have the respect and the regard to continue to do the work that we do. And Madam Speaker, I have learned a lot in the last 3 years. This is no easy task. And it does require a lot of courage. And it does require a lot of focus. To be able to disagree with people you respect, to be able to argue on points that maybe others don't agree with. So we shall, and I stand with pride to support this measure that will build back the Guam Congress to be a place where we can honor and celebrate and then root and sustain all the deliberations that need to be made to ensure that policies are made to ensure that all people are provided opportunity for quality of life. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill has a lot of sentimentality to me because my grandfather, Franklin J.A. Kitigua, former Speaker and Senator, was in both the historic building and in this current building. He was here in the 20th Guam Legislature, and here we are 12 legislatures later, still here. As the prime author of the bill mentioned, we've spent $7 million in rent alone, renting out this building. And I'm very interested in making sure that we return to our historical roots. You know, 4 of us new senators took the half-a-day pledge, and one of the things I talked about when we signed that pledge was that it's more than just words on a document. It's about what's in our hearts, and it's about in the work that we do. And surely, if we're going to sign a half-a-day pledge, it should be a part of us internally that we want as much as possible to return to our historic roots, especially when it has to do with the dignity and honor that comes with being a public servant. Returning to the historic legislative building is not only sentimental in my grandfather having been there, but it's also sentimental to the history of our people, and it's sentimental to what that building represents when it was up and running and what that meant to the island at that time. You see, when our legislature was in that historic building, Madam Speaker, our island was booming. That was the time when Guam was going through great growth. That was the time when we were taking care of our retirees and we were taking care of all of our employees fairly. That was the time when we were starting to realize that paying our people what they're worth for the work they do is important. Those were the kinds of budgets that were being passed in that historic legislature, Madam Speaker. That's the kind of budget that we passed yesterday. And it is only so fitting for us to marry a return of that mentality to a return to the historic building and the snapshot in time when we were having those priorities, because those are the right priorities. Our jobs as public servants, as lawmakers, as the ones who are determining the budgets of this government, is to earmark the priorities of the people and to match those priorities with what we have available. And in working with the budget that we did yesterday, we were able to use numbers the governor provided, numbers that the Office of Finance and Budget researched, and we were able to match those with the priorities of the people, the priorities of our historic roots, the priorities that remain in that building that we are going to seek to renovate and restore. Madam Speaker, those priorities reflect the half-a-day pledge inside of us. Those priorities reflect taking care of our people. Taking care of our people when the resources are available. And this bill reflects restoring the people's legislature when the resources are available. And if that is not sentimental and so important to all of us, then I don't know what we're doing here. But I know that it's sentimental and so important to a lot of us here. Just as the budget was sentimental and so important to a lot of our people. And I'm confident that our colleagues will rally around this, and they'll rally around that budget, and they'll rally around the sentimentality of taking care of our people. I wanted to speak very briefly also, Madam Speaker, to highlight what the terms and conditions of this loan that we're going to be able to get for this this project is going to, what it reflects. I mean, it's an awesome deal. I'm putting on my financial background hat here. There's nowhere where you'll be able to get a $4 million loan fixed rate for 5 years at 4.5%. Nowhere. You could have the best credit rating in the world and you won't get that. Even somebody with stellar credit can go out and borrow $20,000 on 5-year terms and you'll get maybe 6, 7, 8%. Here we're getting 4.5. An amazing deal. And I really got to just give a shout out and a huge thank you to my former president, Luliang Guerrero, for making that kind of a commitment. Because she too understands the sentimentality of that building. She too understands that restoring it and making it even greater than it was is going to be a testament to the commitment of this legislature to not only restore the priorities of this government in taking care of its people, but to make that priority greater than what it was. That's where we are. That's what this bill represents. That's what our budget represented. That's what I'm going to continue to represent. That's what I encourage all of my colleagues to represent. Because that's what we're here for, to serve the people and to restore us, not just in building but in heart and in intent, restore us to the idea that taking care of our people and having a sense of pride and dignity is important. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Welcome, Senator. On the main motion, Senator Muñoz-Barnes, you're recognized.
Sijos Masi, Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to stand and rise in support of this Bill 155. Madam Speaker, I also want to note that my grandfather, the late Colonel Juan Muñoz, was a senator in the 6th and 8th Guam Legislature. In the 6th Legislature, he was written in as a senator. And I just want to say that even as a young teenager, I was part of the Youth Congress and played and had a very memorable experience being a part of the Youth Congress and being able to deliberate a lot of the bills on session floor at the old legislative building. But what comes to mind to me is again, what was said by the former speaker who's still with us today, and that's Speaker Joaquin C. Arriola. When he said that, I don't know if the people of Guam realize that this building has got more historical importance than all other buildings here in Aganya. When you talk about how Aganya, Madam Speaker, was the place that everybody went to, everybody who stayed here on the island came and congregated here in the village of Aganya. Mr. Arriola speaks about the history and what was deliberated here in this legislative bill, in that legislative building. And I want to say that, Madam Speaker, there were many, many attempts. When the building was vacated, I think in the 90s, there were many instances where they tried to bring it back, tried to renovate and refurbish it. And I want to share with you, Madam Speaker, being in this august body for 5 terms, I do know that there have been people and former senators and former chairpersons who've come to me and have asked me to see what we could do to bring that building back alive. And right here with me was one of those drawings that talked about the different plans that they had. And one of this rendition, these drawings came from the late Eddie Rosario as an architect. He had this submitted and the government paid for it. And I do know that the family just recently has requested for this back. And I told them that because they gave it to us, that Mrs. Del Rosario is the rightful owner, that I would give it back to her because this was one of the copies that she kept for her husband. I want to share with you, Madam Speaker, that at that time, that proposal, we couldn't even touch. We couldn't even find the resources. Even when Guam was doing good back then, we could not find the resources to get that building built. But as we look today, as we hear the voices of all the speakers that are still alive today saying, when will we find it in our hearts to bring back the original glory that that building should have? Who will listen? Who will take the time to listen, Madam Speaker? And this august body, and I know that just didn't happen this term, Madam Speaker, because between you, me, and the majority leader and the vice speaker, we've been working for it for the last 3 terms. But before that, I think it was over 20 years. I'm saying that we have the opportunity today we were given the financial capability of working with what was offered to us, working closely with the government stakeholders, and we can bring it back. Like the words of the good speaker, King Ariola, when he said, finally somebody's listening. I, from my heart, want to say that I pray that when our legislative building, our home, across the Agana Cathedral, the Congress building, the old legislature, where the first youth Congress walked into, when that building is restored to its original glory and the dignity that it's given back to, I want to share with you. I want to walk side those speakers and those senators that are still alive today, our colleagues who did so much for our island. I want to stand beside them and walk through those halls again. Madam Speaker, this is not just good for the legislature. This is not just good for our people. This is not just good for our island economically. Tourists time and time and time again say, every time you ask them on research and evaluations and surveys, they always say they want to know about Guam's history. They want to know about the leaders that walk through this place. They want to vision. They want to touch. They want to know the history. But more importantly, Madam Speaker, what better way than to give back to our leaders who walk this legislature, that they be given something back that they worked so hard for. So, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this legislation. I want to thank the good majority leader, Senator Respicio, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of the co-sponsorship. And I want to thank all the speakers who came here on the public hearing, who spoke in support of this legislation, but more importantly, for all those who worked with the Guam Legislature, that a part of history will be restored to its original glory. Sana Masi.
Thank you, Senator. On the main motion, Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I had apprehensions about standing after our good colleague from Telefofo rose and said it had sentimental value to him because his grandfather served there. And I realized that I was legal counsel to his grandfather before he was born. And, but I really do have to stand because at the hearing, we had 3 speakers that were with us that came to the hearing and testified for this bill. But I really want to also acknowledge the hard work that was done by 2 other speakers, one who is no longer with us and one who is with us, but for some reason didn't show up that day. And I'm referring to Speaker Mark Forbes. When I came to this legislature 8 years ago, I can't count the number of times that Speaker Forbes walked from his office over here in this building, came and got me at my office at the Pan Am building, and dragged me over to the old Congress Hall to look and talk about the need to have bipartisan support for the rebuilding, the reconstruction of that building. And so I want to acknowledge the efforts that Speaker Forbes and Speaker Umpinko had during the period that I was here in this Guam legislature in trying to move this effort forward. And I think both of them should get considerable credit because they kept insisting, and it was unfortunate that it was because or fortunate that it was when we got the leadership back that we were able to push this through with the retiring speaker's efforts to get this on the registry of historic places. But I think the two Republican speakers who preceded us ought to get some recognition for all of their efforts also in trying to see that this building is rebuilt. It is, as has been said by everybody, a very historical building, and it is very important that we rebuild it. Not only was I legal counsel to one of the retiring speaker's grandfathers, I also had the fortune or misfortune of having my first confirmation hearing, which was just a little bit interesting, and I would like to see that closet in the back redone so that I can go back and get in that closet to think about the time that my confirmation hearing and testimony was being heard. We cried in that closet during the hearing. But the building has considerable history, and it goes back to the walkout, and I won't mention how we talked about the walkout on one of our flights, Madam Speaker, but it's a very important date in your life, and so I want to, but it is a very important date in Guam's history, that at that point we forced the issue about our self-determination, and the leadership that was exhibited by the speaker, different Speaker Wampat, and some of the others, including Speaker Taitano. And so I want to acknowledge them, and just mention, I mean, even for me, besides my public hearing that was done there, my confirmation hearing, as a child, I was very intrigued by that building, and I spent more days over at that building than I did at the Academy of Music, where I was supposed to be, because I wanted to watch the legislature in session and Judge Shriver in session. And even as a 5-year-old, that was very important to me, and I continued to do that until I got run over by a car crossing the street. So, as was said earlier, it has a lot of sentimental value to everybody, but it has more historical value to this island, and it just causes me shame every time I drive by in front of it and I see all of the tourist buses that are there, and they're taking a picture of this shell that looks like the Hiroshima Memorial because it's just hollowed out. I mean, it really is shameful. And I look forward to the day when the museum is finished, the Congress building is finished. And I don't know if any of you have done it recently. I've been Mr. Mom for the last couple of weeks and having to drive through the back of the administration building. You should all take the time to see how beautiful the azotea is, how the chocolate house is now renovated. The old museum that was in there is now being completely redone. It looks great. We as a legislature should take pride in the fact that we pushed the hot bond through and have gotten the money to restore that. At some point in the future, I'm hoping to support Governor Calvo in his effort to rebuild the Palazzo, but that will also require removing part of the F.L. Guerrero building. But that's a whole other discussion for some later date. But it is imperative that we try to bring Hagåtña back to the glory that it did have prior to the war and immediately after the war. And the first step is to get the Congress building back to its original glory. And I have to commend the architects for the addition that they added in the back. I mean, I was there when they had the addition in the back that were 2 modular homes that were frightening. But the design that the architects have for the building in the back are perfect in that they match the architecture of the main building, make it LED platinum by having the roof completely covered with solar panels to try to assist in bringing down the power bill for the building. But it is a beautiful start, and I really do think that it's imperative that the time is now, and we must move forward with this, because at some point, I would also like, while I'm still able to walk into that building and remember the great times that I had as a 5-year-old, and then before some of these members were members of the Youth Congress or even born, I was in that hall working as legal counsel upstairs. So I hope that we have enough votes to get this through, Madam Speaker, because it is time that the Guam Congress building is restored. It's not being rebuilt. It's being restored to its original glory, and a new building is being, a small addition in the back is being put in so that we can take into account the needs of additional staffers. But it's an excellent project, and I congratulate you and our majority leader, but I also think that in all fairness, we have to recognize the 2 former Republican speakers that preceded you and their efforts to get this done. And they should also be commended and thanked for their efforts. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome, Mr. Vice Speaker. On the main motion, does anybody else like to speak? There being none, Senator Respicio, would you like to close?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you also, colleagues, for all of your comments on Bill 155-32 and all of the support and the desire to allow us to stay the course. And stay the course means that we pass this bill, that we're certain the governor will sign it, because he has gone on public record saying that he'd like to see the legislature building be restored in conjunction with the Guam Museum building, which this body has also supported. But also, Madam Speaker, staying the course with the desired outcome to, in the best way possible, restore the old legislature building, recognizing the limited resources that's given to us in our branch of government, and to be able to do this without having to appropriate a single penny. And I think, Madam Speaker, what's missing from this discussion, and I'd like to bring it up, particularly because a previous speaker brought up that we have our blinders on and we're doing these things, but we're not thinking things all the way through, and that this is not fiscally responsible. I think just the opposite. I think we've been more than fiscally responsible, and the fact that we're able to present a bill for the legislature to consider, a bill to adopt the financing aspect to reconstruct the old legislature building, a bill that does not contain a single penny to be appropriated from the government of Guam, but recognizes that the legislature will be able to service this debt from the existing resources given to us, from the post office rental, Madam Speaker, as well as from trying to find resources from within. And I think that's what we should recognize, that if we want to wait another 6 months to figure out what we want to do with the building that's housing the Guam Department of Education now, another 6 months being here would translate to $240,000 in monies that we could avoid spending. And I don't think anybody would really want us to stay here for a day longer and use our resources to pay for a building that we don't even own. We've been here for 23 years and we don't own this building. The people of Guam do not own this building, Mr. Speaker. And so I certainly, again, appreciate all of the hard work that's been done over the years. And at the public hearing, we did recognize former Speaker Mark Forbes, because you had also brought up at the public hearing. And Speaker Forbes' idea of how he would have liked to restore the building was to use a Spanish motif, and then Speaker Pinko had another concept, and as I explained earlier, there were so many renditions over the years. But the reason why we're able to stay the course is because we decided what we're going to do by way of adopting a resolution. So this just wasn't about one or two people deciding what that building was going to look like. This was about an entire legislative body being guided by the majority, being supported in a bipartisan way. And you can see in the sponsorship, it's not only Democrats that are supporting this bill. We also have Republicans on board, and I appreciate all of the support. And I move to add Senator Brant McCready also as a co-sponsor.
On that motion, hearing no objection.
And again, thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, for all of the support. And notwithstanding the kind of discussion that we had on Bill 155 as amended, I really hope for unanimous consent so we can be united in this desire to want to restore the old legislature to its old glory, as well as recognizing what we have to do additionally to be able to make all of those things possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the motion to send the bill down to hearing no objection. The next bill on the agenda is Bill 63. Oh. Bill 121. Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to place Bill number 122-32LS to the third reading file, and I'd like to briefly discuss it.
All right, on the motion, place 122, I'm sorry.
122? Sorry, oh yeah, one? Oh, wait. Yeah, I think I left it up there. I'm sorry, we're starting first with 121, then 122. To place 121-32LS, the third reading file, I'd like to briefly discuss it.
Hear no objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill, of course, is, and I'd like to thank my colleagues who have supported this and in its introduction, Senator Munya Barnes, Senator Respicio, and Senator Duenas. And then there are other members as well who are supportive of this bill. What this appropriation is of about $700,000 that be escheated to the general fund would do is that it would go to the Department of Administration for the purpose of funding the acquisition of software, migration, fiber connection security, and other upgrades necessary to support and protect the government of Guam's computer system and network infrastructure. This system is what they would call the Power 7, in which the Department of Revenue and Taxation has the hardware through federal dollars. The Department of Administration also has the hardware, and my understanding is that also the Department of Corrections. However, the two machines in two separate places actually don't speak to each other. What the software would do is that as soon as any type of payments is being made, automatically it would be reflected. It will be shown, and everyone in the government, including OFB, would be able to have access to all the information that has been inputted by the government. To explain a little bit more, because then the question is where then would the money be coming from? And that's why I need to make some amendments, because originally, well, give you a little bit more history, is that the escheat law has been in the book since 1976 for unclaimed checks, and in 1986 for dormant accounts. So in practice, these funds were are always transferred to the general fund until the statute of limitation has been completely exhausted. The Division of Accounts became aware of this escheated monies in the process of fiscal year 2004, And now in this bill, of course, would allow the government to dedicate the revenue stream to improve our revenues for infrastructure and services. And that was a testimony, of course, that was even provided by the Deputy Director of Department of Administration. When this all happened, and that's why I need to make some amendments now, is because the governor then actually had realized the same thing. And using, of course, the language in the budget law that to authorize him to make prior year obligation monies, is that the $6 million, of course, was taken and used to pay for refunds. And what had happened too, concurrently, was that announcements were being made, the monies were placed aside, checks were all printed, of course, and out of that total amount, not even half has been claimed any of these monies. Now, and that was from 2012. So hence then now the need to go in and make some amendments for fiscal year 2013, because what's going to happen that immediately on the new fiscal year, the monies then immediately would be placed into that account, and that has not been appropriated. So if I may then at this time, if you can look on, and they're very simple amendments that, and I mean I have a copy that I'll give the clerks, but I'll walk you through it, is that on page 1 is to remove rather the word on line 4 at, and replace that to prior to. So prior to, they cheated to the general fund prior to the end of fiscal year 20, that's the next amendment, 13. And is available for appropriation in fiscal year 2013 and add, and also fiscal year 2014. That's the other change. So do you want to do one at a time? Like
Please.
Prior to? Okay, so the first one then on line 4, page 1, is to delete the word at and to add the words prior to.
Any objection?
And then, so they'll be prior to the end of fiscal year instead of 2012, because the money has been already used, it will be for 2013. That's the new amendment, to change 12 to 13.
On the amendment to change 12 to 13, hearing no objection.
And the other for line 5 is that there will be available for appropriations in fiscal year 2013 and fiscal year 2014.
All right, to add 14.
Yes, fiscal year 2014.
Any objection? Hearing none.
And on the next page is that on line 6 on section 2, that funds where it says not expended, but not to delete expended to obligated.
What line is that?
Line 6, page 2.
Any objection? Hearing none.
And the last change would be on line 13, section 3, is to delete no later than 180 days, and change that to that the report shall be made on a quarterly basis as to the obligation and expenditures of the funds. So delete no later than 180 days and add the words on a quarterly basis as to the obligation and expenditures of the fund.
Hearing no objection.
Then line 15, to add the word after the word following, where it says, no, I'm sorry, it's line following the, add the word the, on line 14, I'm sorry, line 14.
Believe that is 15.
No, where it says, following the enactment, it's just more.
Right,
to-
okay.
Okay, so those are the amendments that, to bring it up to date. And that's basically it. So I want to thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues for hopefully your support.
Senator Munya Barnes, you're recognized. Any other senator wish to be heard after Senator Munya Barnes? Senator Barnes.
Citos Masi, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of Bill 121-32 LS, and I'd like to thank the good author, Speaker Wampat, for giving me the opportunity to be her second co-sponsor, but more importantly, I'm just going to say the third time's a charm, so we're going to try this again. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to note that, yes, this bill would fund DOA's acquisition of the software migration, fiber connection, security, government-wide Active Directory, and upgrades for the government of Guam's computer system and network infrastructure and all the other related purposes that are on this bill. In short, it's called Power 7. And I know that the good retiring speaker spoke about the why and what it's going to be used for. But more importantly, so Mr. Speaker, as we look at this Power 7 and this software, because for the listening audience out there, the government of Guam was given a grant by the federal government to buy the hardware, and when that was approved and the government bought the hardware, they were given the software, but there was a timeline to that. And in order for them to continue to utilize the machine, they would need to purchase this. Mr. Speaker, I know it's been difficult to try and get a lot of the information out, and a lot of times you'll hear from the government entities that handle the financial transparency of the government. You have the Department of Education and you have DRT. Both agencies have this machine, and both agencies would need this software. But this would literally give what I would say a check and balance to the transparency of our government resources and the tracking of all the resources that come to the island. The good speaker spoke about DOC having the same operation, but it was told to us that the software that would be utilized would be able to protect the information, and those protected firewalls will go up, and that the check and balances would go back between both the Department of Administration and the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Mr. Speaker, I truly believe that this is a good thing. A lot of the transactions that are being done today within our government is being done manually. The opportunity to get this upgraded machine was provided to us by the federal government, but it is our responsibility to give them the resources to get the needed software, the crucial software to effectively manage the government's financial situation. So I want to say that we've gone at this for several times now, and I'm hoping that with the support of my colleagues that we will give the opportunity for our government of Guam, agencies of DOA and Rev and Tax to be transparent and be accountable for all the resources that come in and all the resources that are expended out. That recording mechanism is there. By providing them this software, it would give them that needed tool, and I think it's really important. So I support this, and I want to thank the good speaker again for giving me the opportunity to be a part of her co-sponsorship, and I ask all my colleagues to support this effort. Sana Masi.
Any other speakers? If not, Madam Speaker, you're recognized to close.
Thank you. I just want to make that motion and send it down to third reading.
Hearing no objection to sending it down. The next bill on the agenda is Bill
122.
122.
If I may also make the motion to send 122-32LS to third reading file, and I'd like to just, third reading file, and I'd like to just briefly discuss it.
Hearing no objection.
And like I said, these are all companion bills, and the information is basically the same that I gave earlier from mischeated funds. This is for $400,000 for the purpose of purchasing completely marked police vehicles, which should include but not limited to graphics, emergency lighting, siren, police, radio communication system, and a prisoner transport system. The purchase, we would like to make sure that there would be a warranty and a guarantee and a maintenance program on this vehicle. We have a tendency in the government to purchase vehicles or any equipment, and we never really consider a maintenance program. And at the same time, we like to be able to support the local vendors so that the vehicles should be purchased from the manufacturer's authorized dealer in Guam, and to make sure that then the full warranty and routine maintenance schedule would be there. And the recommended schedule is for a minimum of 3 years or up to 125,000 miles, whichever then occurs first. Now, the request on 121, the language will be the same in terms of the amendments, again, that I like to proffer. And I guess what it is the same things, to put the language prior to the end of fiscal year, to change it to 2013, to add fiscal year 2014, to change from expended to obligated, and then the same language rather than 180 days on a quarterly basis as the obligation expenditures of the fund. So that's the same amendment. If I may just do it in whole, that I'd like to proffer that amendment.
Hearing no objection. Senator Nicholas and Senator Muñoz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to rise in full support of this bill. You know, in the budget that we passed, we made sure to include a provision of $800,000 for a new police cycle. You know, we're looking out for the safety of our community in that budget that we passed. We want to make sure that our homes, our streets, our families are all safer. That's part of our priorities in the budget bill that we just passed. And this bill further enhances that priority by not only following through with a new cycle of police officers, but now we're also going to make sure the money is going to be there to get the vehicles they need to get on the streets and keep us safe. So I rise in full support of this bill. I believe that it is a further complement to the budget bill that we just passed in taking care of our people and setting the right priorities. So I'd like to rise in full support, Mr. Speaker, and I also urge all of my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Muñoz.
Mr. Speaker, again, I rise in full support of this bill, and I want to thank the good speaker again for giving me the opportunity to be a part of her co-sponsorship. And I just want to say, as she shared the provisions of why this is needed, and my sentiments to the fact that increased police presence in the villages means lower crime and safer communities. And speaking with the police community, they are in need of these vehicles. I am appreciative at the fact that the speaker included the warranty that was suggested of not just that 1 year, but the minimum of 3 years or 125,000 miles, whichever comes first. I believe it will go a long way to saving those vehicles and making sure that the warranty is in place so that those routine maintenance checkups are included and keeps the vehicles safer. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak in support of Bill 122. Right? Sanamasi.
Any other senator wish to be heard? Hearing none, Madam Speaker. On the motion to send the bill down, hearing no objection. Bill 124, Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Bill number 124-32 LS. I'd like to place it in third reading file and again to briefly discuss it and make some amendments.
Hearing no objection.
Thank you again very much. This is the last portion, of course, of the escheated funds, and what this would do now here is actually then to appropriate to the Department of Revenue and Taxation for the purpose of funding a real property reevaluation, and that's $1.4 million. There are amendments, of course, that I like to also offer, which is the exact same amendments with exception of one, and that is on page 2, which rather than the 1 year following the date of enactment, is I like to make that 6 months, that they need to start moving with this. They've done the overlay, the aerial view, and so we want them to do this. What this also would do is that, we're talking 1.4 million. If they're not very serious about doing this, and then of course the money will no longer be available. But so I'm hoping that they would be able to move forward. They've said that there's actually an RFP that already has been prepared. It just hasn't gone out because they need the funding. This now should be able to do it and to kick it off, to continue with it. So all the amendments originally that I gave with the same thing again, with the prior to the year 2013, adding fiscal year, fiscal year 2013, on page 2, line 3, where they're within 6 months rather than 1 year, and then the last on line 9, on a quarterly basis as to the obligation and expenditures of the funds, and to delete no later than 180 days. And I also have a copy that I can give to the clerks as well.
On the amendments, hearing no objection. Do you wish to speak on the bill, Madam? Senator Nicholas, then Senator Munya-Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I rise in full support of this bill. The governor in his original budget transmittal to the legislature included $5.5 million in anticipated property tax revenues, and that in and of itself reflects how inaccurate his budgeting is, because that $5.5 million wasn't available. It wasn't available because this process wasn't undertaken. And so this bill would therefore allow for the property valuations to take place and for us to eventually realize that $5.5 million. So with this bill, the budget of the government of Guam should see a $5.5 million increase at a minimum by next fiscal year. And so I rise in full support of that, also for the point that when we do this revaluation and when we realize that increase of $5.5 million in property taxes, it's also going to have a dramatic effect on our debt ceiling. It's going to increase our debt ceiling by at least $150 million. So when the governor says that the credit rating of the government of Guam is going to be put at risk by using a $12 million line of credit, again, he's thinking in a very, very small vacuum, a very narrow box, not taking into account the full picture of the financial resources that this government has and the full picture of the very same $5.5 million that he was referencing, because $12 million isn't even 10% of $150 million. So when we pass this bill, we're going to realize $5.5 million in additional revenues next fiscal year, and we're going to have a debt ceiling increase of $150 million. And that line of credit should be paid off by the end of the fiscal year anyway, because the governor's revenue estimates for income taxes should be over-provisioned by $12 million. We should be able to pay that off. So end result with this bill, $5.5 million more by next fiscal year and $150 million more in debt service capacity. So I rise in full support of it. I think that it is an excellent complement to the very thorough budget bill that we passed yesterday. And I'd like to thank the author for her hard work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Nicholas. Senator Munya Barnes.
Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to thank the good speaker, Wampat, for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this co-sponsorship again. As I said earlier, this is the third time we're at this, and we hope that our colleagues support this effort. I'd like to thank my colleagues who've jumped on the bandwagon to be a part of this. As I share the same sentiment with the sentiments of the retiring speaker and sharing the glance or the vision of what's going to happen if we give the Department of Revenue and Taxation the resources that it needs from this escheated funds to do the proper revaluation that has been needed, then of course a better realization of what the government should be receiving would be indeed done. So I thank the good speaker for all her hard work in the committee, and I hope that this bill gets voted on by the rest of the colleagues who are not on this bill. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I hope that you will give it careful consideration, Mr. Speaker Sanamasi.
Madam Speaker, if you wish to close.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to, and I forgot to do all the others, but yes, it's really very important, yes, that I do thank Speaker Pangilinan and his committee for hearing all the bills and providing the committee report. And although I know his position on it, nevertheless, I'd like to thank him. And I'd like to thank my colleagues who are here at least for listening and participating. So if I may, and I'm sorry I didn't do it for the other two unless a notwithstanding clause can be put in, but I'd like to include Senator Nicholas as a co-sponsor, Senator Yamashita, Senator Rodriguez, and Senator Morrison as co-sponsors of this bill. And if I may, could I do that with 121 and 122?
For all three bills.
Yes, for all three. Thank you very much. And so the motion to send it down, thank you very much. Yes, that's your prize for staying.
On the motion, hearing no objection. The next bill,
Thank you very much.
63.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is the last one, bill number 63, and this is what's going to wrap up everything, what we just did with 124. And I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to make a motion then to place Bill 63-32 COR as substituted then on the floor, so depending how the members may feel. And with this, of course, it's not what's the original bill, but the substituted version.
On the motion to place 63 as substituted by the author on the floor.
No, it'll be just as
Hearing
substituted
no
on the
objection.
floor. On the floor.
Yes.
Okay.
As substituted by the author on the floor. Hearing no objection.
On the floor. Thank you very much. And I'd like again to thank my colleagues again for their support, Senator Yamashita, Senator Munya Barnes, and all of the others that I have in here. I'd like to include them as well as co-sponsors. I will do that right away, so I won't forget. So that's my first amendment to put down. Let me see, the ones I had, the clerks, I think you have the numbers. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, okay, yes, so the ones that I gave. I can read sign language. The names are Senator St. Nicholas, Senator Rodriguez, Senator Morrison. Did I get everybody in here?
Hearing no objection.
Yes, right? I got everybody in here. Okay, thank you. What this would do is that it, because of the previous bill, 124, which would then fund now the reevaluation, that what would happen now as a result of that, if everybody, well, we all should know already by this time, that then there is this creation of the Territorial Education Facilities Fund. And that is as a result of property taxes, which actually would go into education and related purposes. So this is designed, of course, then just to use those revenues now after an evaluation was done, so that then we can to consider the replacement or renovation of Simon Sanchez High School and other government Department of Education facilities that may require an additional construction, because I know there was a discussion by the board and the superintendent that they would like to consider possibly even a central middle school, but leaving that basically up to them. Then there's to do a rehabilitation and, of course, the maintenance of our facilities. There were several of us who went and attended the ribbon cutting ceremony of two beautiful facilities in Southern High School after, of course, using the ARA monies, and that's the new or renovated gymnasium and the Fine Arts Theater. But, you know, maintenance money is not being provided for that, and this definitely will take that into consideration. So what the substitution, of course, and you know how it is, the needs of our government changes all the time, and we like to try to be as responsive as we can to assist. So the top priority, of course, in which we would like to do this is that there is this conservative amount that we were told by Reverend Tax, the possibility, the lowest amount is $7 million to realize. But yes, it could even go up to 11 million. It depends, and hoping, of course, and I know that the chairman has been very supportive and puts the fire under them to make sure that they are really aggressive to go out and collect the money. So what some of the monies are to be used for is that, as stated earlier, is that besides the Simon Sanchez High School renovation replacement, is a sum of about $1 million to the University of Guam Capital Improvement Fund for the construction of the Student Services Center and the engineering annex at the university. The second is for the Guam Community College for a renovation of Building 100 and the DNA laboratory. And as you know, Dr. Cotter has been really very resourceful, very aggressive, going out there, trying to get monies from everyone. Every department and agency who's never contributed, she's visited them to make sure that either they pay for furniture or they pay for the LEDs or, you know, you name it. She'll be able to go out there and get the money. And there's only this request of $278,921,000 to be able to finance this building. The public library system is something we always have neglected, and it's very difficult to run a public library, and of course even with the other libraries when they don't have even a territorial librarian at the helm. And of course, most recently, and it's so embarrassing that twice IT&E was able to provide not just equipment but even services for internet, and you know, and what this would do is to support the library in that respect. The fourth is, and this just came in, which I believe just at the end, about 5:30, almost 6 o'clock, when DOE was running here to say that, you know, we had forgotten to take care of the Okadu High School expansion. The Bank of Guam has actually was gracious enough to do this and decided that rather than break it up with different financial institutions, that they would absorb it entirely, and there's the $1.7 million to pay that annual lease that we have for that expansion. And the way this works in the following page, on page 4, is would be a breakdown of the formula, where then 80%, of course, of the remaining balance for GDOE, and this is how it is broken down. So if you take the conservative amount of $7 million, you take out UOG $1 million, you take $278 928 for GCC, you take out 132.15 for the public library and 1.7 for Okadu, then the balance of this 7 million will be about $3.8 million. Then, of course, 80% of that would be 3,105,000, and then 10% of that to continue with to support this going out to when they did the triennial, to maintain that and support it and sustain the real property data system. And then later, by law, there is this funding that then in 5 years, again, that could be done. And then supporting, again, all of the technology that will be needed and the cost, of course, associated with maintaining that property tax system. That's about 10% of that, and that's 388,000. Then this one, of course, I know, Mr. Speaker, you love. This hits you in the heart. And this, of course, that you've always been bugging me about, trying to find ways to do it, and I've never forgotten it, and I put it in the back of my mind. And now here, then, is to be able to have 7% of the remaining balance, at least to be deposited in a fund called the Early Childhood Program Fund. And that's about $271,698. And then on page 5, of course, is that it establishes that Early Childhood Program Fund. That will be there. And then last of all, of course, when we talk about our school children, there's always the need, and I know the First Lady has been pushing for this and trying to get business sectors as well to do this, is the bus shelters, and the 3% of that, the remaining 3% of $116,000. So, I mean, what can I say? They're all, I mean, granted, there are many other programs that are just as important. We try to, as much as we can, to be able to do this, but overall, it seems to be, starting from very early on, taking care of our kids, but how would we be able to do all this anyway if we can't even support revenue and taxation to be able to go out there and do the work that they need to do? And so it takes us from the early childhood program all the way to the highest level of education, and that's we've got the community college from K to 12, community college, the university, and then when the kids leave the school, then there's our public library that they can go to, and read more books, use the computers that are there, and all the while, of course, the shelters to keep our children, safe from inclement weather. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I ask, of course, my colleagues to support Bill 63-32. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita, and then Senator Munoz-Barnes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak with excitement in support of Bill number 63-32. This is really an opportunity to give DOE, UOG, and GCC the tools and the resources to move forward and to better what they have, and then to dream of things that they want to grow. I was at the home of the Sharks the other day, and they have a new color now. It's not gray and black, but it's now red and black, which is interesting, but that's what the students wanted. And they are thrilled to know that this legislature, that Madam Speaker, has them at the top of the list. And so we are very excited and hopeful that they will be able to realize reconstruction of some of their badly needed facilities sooner than later. Down the way from the home of the Sharks is the home of the Roadrunners. And again, Madam Speaker has listened with great concern and care about the plight that the Roadrunners are going through, and we succeeded in getting the bathroom lockers maybe 60% addressed. They still have some work that needs to be done, but this will provide them some opportunity to address. The Roadrunners live in a place, today it was raining. The students, the 1,200 students, don't have a place to congregate. They have no covering, and they're middle schoolers. And those of us who remember middle school, or those of us who've worked with middle schoolers, and certainly Madam Speaker built futures through our middle schoolers, knows that it's really important to provide a place that is safe and conducive to being an adolescent. And I'm hoping that the superintendent will really study his needs and his plans and see how he can wisely invest these monies as he and his principals build on private-public partnerships so that the private folks can come in and, as they did at Atacao, are building shelters for those kids. But the Roadrunners Benevente Middle School community really needs a new school. And I hope that that's near the top of someone's wish list, top of our list too. How do we address that? I am absolutely thrilled about the Early Childhood Fund, Mr. Speaker. I've been standing right next to you, as the Madam Speaker has been, and saying that we really need to do better in developing the first 8 years of our life on Guam. We have a huge issue of our social problems in our families, our abuse rates, our family violence rates. We're looking at building a new prison because that's overcrowded. And if we seriously wisely invest $1, for every dollar that we wisely invest in early childhood, we would get $5 to $8. And we know that there's certain states that look at what is happening the first 8 years, and then they decide how many prison cells they're going to have to build. And so this is a very good step in the right direction. I've already spoken with the new dean of the School of Education, and he's very excited about the training opportunities that can be gotten from this pocket of money. And he is already working with GCC and GDOE on this. The library, Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely excited that we are going to be able to support them with trained people who can better navigate, help Sandy and Terry and all of those folks there who are doing the best that they can right now. You got trained people who know how to best use the limited resources. We'll get even further. It is true that ITNE, through their corporate sponsorship, is energizing the branches across our island. I believe that Bill 6332 is a really good statement about what we are doing to support education at all levels, beginning at the beginning, at all our training facilities, and through our branches and our public libraries. So I do hope that the senators in this body will consider supporting Bill number 63-32. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yamashita. Senator Munya Barnes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity again to speak and rise in full support of Bill 63-32 COR. I really want to take the time to thank the good retiring speaker, Senator Yamashita, and of course the author of the legislation, Speaker Judy Wampat, for making me a part of their co-sponsorship. As we look at this, Mr. Speaker, as we look at giving the opportunity and making sure that the Department of Education facilities requiring, whether it be new construction, rehabilitation, or maintenance for education is being given, it's even more pleasing to know that we've taken both the concerns of UOG and GCC to work on the facilities that they need. The other thing that is really good, Mr. Speaker, is the opportunity to speak about giving the opportunity for the bus shelters to be given to our students around the community. As you and I know that there has been a shortage of bus shelters around the island, and being able to be given at least the certain percentage for these shelters to be given, I think it goes a long way for support. Mr. Speaker, both retiring speakers spoke about the opportunity to support the early childhood program. More importantly, what's good here is being able to have the mechanism of making sure that the reporting requirements are there, making sure that the funding is available for all these projects, and making sure that the maintenance is also provided. You know, we can build a lot of things, but if we don't maintain it and we don't give the opportunity to make sure that the maintenance is placed, then it's like doing it and going back to square one several years later if maintenance is not instilled. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank the good author of this legislation for giving me the opportunity to be a part of the sponsorship, and I hope that my colleagues support this very good bill for the renovations and construction for the Department of Education and the Early Childhood Program. Sana Masi.
Thank you very much. Any other senator wish to be heard? Senator Nicholas? Brief recess. Legislature is back in session. Senator Nicholas, you wish to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in full support of this bill. I think it's an excellent way for us to prioritize what we're going to be anticipating in terms of an increase in our debt ceiling and an increase in our property tax revenues. I did want to make one amendment, and I just consulted with the prime author, and she's in concurrence, in order for us to make sure that we're going to be containing these amounts. We wanted to add an amendment here on page 3, line 7.
Proceed.
After the word appropriated, place a comma to read, not to exceed $7 million.
On that amendment.
And what this amendment will do,
Okay,
Mr.
hold on.
Speaker,
Go ahead.
what this amendment will do is, if the revenue streams are increased to $7 million, then that full $7 million will be allocated based on how this bill breaks down. If the revenues were to exceed $7 million, if it were to be $12 million or $15 million, then that remaining $8 million will remain in TEFF for us to be able to reprogram to other priorities within the department, whether it's beefing up our counseling, because we do need more help in our counseling departments, or if it's to renovating existing facilities so that our kids have a better learning environment, cleaner restrooms. We want to make sure that, if the amount is higher than $7 million, if it goes to 15, that we're not breaking down the percentages here that's on page 4, that these percentages aren't going to be hyperinflated due to a higher than anticipated bump in property tax money. So by limiting it to $7 million, the remainder of that property tax revenue will go into TEFF for other appropriations. If in fact it is discovered that more than $7 million will be needed for us to make these projects realized in a fashion that's going to be effective, we can thereafter appropriate additional amounts from the TEFF on a continuous and ongoing basis. But this language will just set up a good structure so that we're not going to be over-allocating above and beyond what's needed. So in consultation with the prime author, we've determined that $7 million would be a safe number. And so I'd like to make the amendment as proffered, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. On that amendment, I saw Senator Yamashita. No? Okay. Any other senator wish to be heard on the amendment? On the main motion? Any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? If not, Madam Speaker, you're welcome to close.
Prior to that, I need to make one more change that was requested by legal counsel to make sure that it's codified correctly on page 5, line 18, where it says the subsection, that instead of 4, it should be 6.
On that amendment, hearing no objection.
And then very simple, line 23, subject to any 2 transfers or subject to any transfer, so I guess the extra 2. So another than that, the extra 2, typographical error?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a typo on
Okay, all right.
line 23.
So
And
with that,
to
then-
any 2. So we'll just drop 1, 2. On the motion, send it down?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Any objection to sending it down? Hearing none. We'll take a short recess. Mr. Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we recess till tomorrow morning at 10, at which time we should be able to vote on the bills that are in the third reading file.
Hearing no objection, we're recessed until 10.